Welcome. This is the January 15th, 2025 OpenZFS production user call. We have Steve, Jan, Daniel, Andrew, Eva, and myself, Michael, so far. And there's some very big news to share, but let's just punch through some items. A broad question, especially when Stu rolls in. I would love to know, what is the perfect day of NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters event in Vegas, is to drop in. I think that's in May. Check it out, nabshow.com, I believe. Broadly, I am fundraising for OpenZFS User and Developer Summit, BSD CAN and production user projects right now, and have actually made huge progress on BSD CAN. Watch the socials for that. But it's early days for the 2025 Summit. Last year's was a huge success, arguably legendary. And the big news, OpenZFS 2.3 has landed, and it has some rather significant features. The RAID-Z expansion that has been in the work for, 4 to 6 years. Fast dedupe, direct I/O, that came up last week. JSON output, which is huge for anyone approaching a ZFS system as a system administrator, hoping to interrogate it for facts in a nice parsable manner. Long names, I hadn't even noticed that one. I guess there are directory name limits that have been addressed. A number of bug fixes, of course, performance improvements, and it is supported in Linux kernel 4.18 through 6.12 and FreeBSD 13.3 onward. Does anyone want to put up their hand for a feature they are most excited about? And by put up your hand, just dive right in. Welcome,
Long
Dave.
names. I've hit that problem before.
Oh, have you? What were you doing that let you hit that?
I think snapshots.
Interesting. Oh, that is great to know. Let me make a note there.
Because sometimes I have very long nested file systems. I'll see if I can find some reference to it.
Okay. Well, that's a perfectly conceivable issue, and I see how most users and developers won't hit it, but when you do hit it, you get mighty unhappy.
It's been some time, but
Cool. Others, RAID-Z expansion has been unique insofar as hobbyists very, very much want it, and in enterprise, it's been a bit of a head scratcher because, hey, you planned out your pool correctly. But I'm curious, has anyone had a production use case for RAID-Z expansion?
Yes, but it hasn't been available, so it
Okay.
hasn't really happened. But it would be just by the definition, expanding the size of an array without having to duplicate and or swap drives in the usual method.
Amen. Or add an entire VDEV, which can initially double the cost of your storage or be a third non-up as you grow. So yeah, that's
Yep.
very
Yeah,
good to hear.
I've been doing everything in mirrors, so it doesn't affect me.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think the factor of time on top of everything makes mirrors pretty attractive for most situations.
Certainly, if you've got the money to spend on them, the problem with mirrors is money.
Right. Well, yes, right. I mean, but the performance is so delicious.
Oh yeah,
It's hard to say no.
absolutely.
And are we talking always two drives mirrored or triple parity to continuously preserve redundancy in case of trouble?
In production for anything critical, I do triple.
Nice. This is the way. And
I
even
have
more
some,
an issue of money. Go ahead.
yeah, I have some stuff that is less important and can, in the event that we were to lose it, can be rebuilt. And so I don't use triple mirrors for that.
Jan, explain your comment about aggressive rebalancing. Is in what we've had to do in the past? If you're
So once you add new VDEVs to your pool, they're only eligible for new writes. So your new capacity is instantly available, but especially when you're growing by a significant ratio to your old pool size, you may want to use all the spindles or flash controller channels. So
Yeah, in
you
order to
kind
get
of
more
have,
performance.
and it would be really nice to have a way, even if it balloons the snapshot sizes, to have something like copy file range in place. Kind of rewrite those blocks in a way which is atomically safe, user space won't mind. Just rewrite those blocks, even if it means that my history explodes in size, so that I don't have to do it manually by basically going over from whatever sharding logic I use and basically tarring something, untarring it in a different directory, and then changing the directories around or something like that.
Mhm.
Because that's really annoying. If there was a little command with a warning, this is not the magic block pointer rewriting, it's just rewriting your content kind of at the boundary of the of the ZFS file system layer to the DMU. Like, you're not going to see it at the VFS, but it is at that layer kind of. That would be nice,
Mhm.
so that I could just tell it in such a way that it's just always safe and I don't have to worry about locking or making things kind of. This script is now the sole writer to this until it's rebalanced, or just wait a while until the data shifts around eventually just through empty storage, is completely unfragmented, fresh drives
Yep.
perform better this day, so
Yep.
I end up with the allocator preferring empty allocation groups. But yeah, that's
All true. Cool. Moving on to fast dedupe. Many of us have been trained to simply note it as a feature on a list and never touch it. Is anyone here present ready to try fast deduplication in production?
I'm too scared because of slow deduplication and my experience with that.
I will definitely be trying that with upcoming storage performance benchmarks that generate similar log files every test run.
Does anyone know if there's a guide what is to be expected, basically how much better should it perform, what to expect if you're not seeing this, there's a bug either in your
Right.
understanding of a feature or in its implementation?
Generally,
Is
each of
this
these has a presentation to go with it, and that's a lovely thing about this community, such that I bet there's something out on the tubes of the world about fast dedupe, even if it's marketing, if you will, from a developer perspective. If someone wants to do a quick search.
there is a
Awesome.
blog post by someone who was involved in the development, but it's only, let's say, qualitative, not quantitative, the argumentation.
Okay. So it is a reasonable question. What are the expectations when Eva mentioned, say, log files? Yes, one, they're probably highly compressible. Two, they might be highly deduplicatable. So that's great, whereas, say, video might not benefit one bit. So that is one to watch. Direct IO came up last week, bypassing the ARC, making VFS more like a traditional file system, but with modern fast hardware, that might be a very good thing. Any commentary there? Any pressing use cases?
How is that different than just disabling, doing,
That is a very good question.
just turning off cache? Like, if you globally turn off cache, is it like what is this doing that's unique?
Was it cache equals none or primary cache equals none? Andrew, you had something?
Well, I was going to say I was having a discussion just yesterday
Hmm.
about some NVMe machines and dealing with ARC on them and what we should do about it. I guess it's something that we need to, I need to do some testing on to see really how it behaves.
That said, do you have an OS that will bring this feature in
Not that,
what
not that specific
amount of
feature
time? Okay.
at this point. I mean, I guess I could shove Linux on it for testing purposes, but for instance, setting primary cache none
Hmm.
as an option.
Fortunately, that should be a super easy, synthetic test to do, is just with primary cache equals none and direct IO enabled. So I'm curious about that.
Would you really
This-
want to set primary cache to off instead of metadata only?
Is that indeed a flag? If so, sure, that's a valid point. None slash. But yes, that general idea of avoiding the arc using the current traditional strategy. Moving on to JSON, I believe Rob made a comment, Rob Norris, that he wouldn't be a ZFS developer if he had this feature, because he wouldn't have had to dance around it and work out other strategies. I, for one, was very happy when SmartMon tools added JSON support. I was not unhappy when they changed their schema without updating their schema version number. But these are all baby steps towards very machine interrogatable systems. Daniel and Andrew, any
Y'all,
are you ready to deploy those? Go ahead.
you all know that's been something I've been arguing for a year or two now. So I'm thrilled to see that in there.
Yes.
And
Amen.
if it's not already been cherry picked into Lumos, I'm going to have to try to track down somebody in my copious free time.
Talk to Hans. Don't know. That's a thought.
Anyone I've ever seen pushing for JSON options has always come at it from a scripting point of view, and I can see how it's useful for that. No
Amen.
more of this parsing the command output and hoping your awk and sed and grep have got it right.
Exactly. And when that was a question of parsing smart control output, oh boy, it was rough. It was rough.
And I have no problem saying that's exactly what I wanted for.
Raison d'être. Okay, long names. We touched on those, Dan. It sounds like you hit those with long snapshots. Did I hear another note on JSON?
No, I was just going to give Daniel a hard time. That's all.
Okay, well, we can take time for that.
Steve, sorry, wasn't it? It was Steve that was just talking. Sorry, I got my names mixed up.
No worries. Well, bug fixes and performance improvements, can't argue with that, and pretty good OS coverage. So I did see some chatter in the Slack channel about, hey, where's, say, Jorgen's work on Mac OS and Windows, but I trust he is pulling from there regardless, so that is a matter of time. Any other comments, questions, ideas for perhaps testing and demonstrating the benefit of these new features? And don't get me wrong, what long and coming features are remaining? Because this is a pretty darn good short list of things that a great many of us have been waiting for. Jump in if you can think of any, but I am delighted with this list.
A few additions to the channel program API would be nice.
Remaining wish list. We talking
Snapshot creation, clone creation, if possible, even file system creation or volume creation. Yeah. I mean, wishes for horses, mounting and unmounting, especially destroying snapshots which are mounted would be nice.
Will a force not take care of that?
No, the thing is that you can't create the mounted property and you can't destroy things which are mounted, because that involves things which are layers above the context in which the channel program runs. So it would be a bit hard to add. But realistically speaking, it would be nice to add that, at least when we, instead of just snapshot creation, clone creation, and the other thing I would wish for is file system creation as an API, because then I could do all my jail thin provisioning from clones in a single channel
Operation.
program
Hmm.
instead of having to return what to do and then run the commands to do it.
Okay, and there's naturally a list that came out of the summit, so I'll take a look at deduplicating that, but I'm delighted these are here. On that point, Jan, Daniel, etc., and company, do you know if there's a FreeBSD package to drop this on a 14.2 or current system just to feel the love?
Does
I
the
know it's on its
OpenZFS
way.
do it?
What's that, Daniel?
Oh, just that I know it's on its way
Okay. Because that's some good goodness. Anyway, there's the release. Give it a try. Thank you, everyone who helped make that happen, especially Bellendorf, the release engineer. Steve, you had a question about getting those snapshot counts up. What's your exact situation? What's your exact concern?
One of the projects I support is a sort of a fragile legacy stack. And currently the retention policy is pretty light. You know, we'll do like maybe 2 or 3 hours of 15-minute snaps, and then we go to hourly for a few days, and then we switch to weekly, monthly, whatever. So there's, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 50 ever are a max under that scenario. But I'm re-examining the risk profile of this application, and I want maximum recoverability. And so I am looking at doing 15-minute snaps for 45 days. And I didn't do the math recently, but I think it's somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 total.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah,
Sorry.
just looking for caution and, you know, comments, thoughts.
Go ahead, Andrew. I've got some
Experience.
feedback. Daniel, I'm sure, has something.
My experience with having a large number of snapshots is it's not going to cause any kind of like performance problem related to your applications and whatnot. Where you might run into some issues is when you get a lot of them, when you start trying to do operations on those snapshots, particularly when you start trying to like list them, it just churns and takes forever. The special device, I believe, is meant to get around it. I haven't done a lot of testing of special devices though. So like you stick a SSD as a special VDEV, and it will keep all that metadata on there so that it can access that nice and quickly.
Quick question. What kind of churn does your application show? Like a meg a day or a terabyte an hour or what?
It'll depend on the customer. Some probably a gig a day. Others maybe, I don't know, 200 megs a day, something like that.
Do you have the physical space for that regardless of performance and other factors?
Yes, although it has been a bit difficult to project the increase in space. We're going to turn it on and then start to keep an eye on things.
Okay.
I've found from my perspective, that's what I've kind of had to do. Customers do what customers do. And so I never really know, who's going to have a gig every hour versus who's going to have, 100 megs every hour, and it ends up being just a gig a day. But ultimately, that's a disk space problem.
I'll jump in and say, one, I recall years ago seeing a system with 20,000 empty snapshots thanks to an automatic script. And well, it worked, but it was very slow to list, and that's long before a lot of the improvements in performance for metadata, et cetera, and especially long before special devices for such things. I'd be curious if you are in a position that you can tier it insofar as your primary storage has a day or two or a week of retention, and you have a backup system that can go back that 45 days or even longer as needed.
I am. I have limited people to sort of manage the complexity, and so as I come up with sort of slightly more complicated schemes, I get a little concerned about will they be honored well. So one thing I had thought about is staying on the same pool, but shifting the snapshots over to a cloned data set, and then pruning them off the primary data set. So that way, like if we need to list and manage our snapshots on the primary, it's less headache. But I kind of want to avoid. I'd like to try the simplest way first.
I can tell you what Michael's recommending is something I'm actually looking at doing in the next month or two for some data sets that have SSD storage on them, but they're going to need to keep a lot of snapshots. So we want to be able to keep those. We want to be able to move those snapshots off onto bulk storage while the actual active stuff is on those SSDs. And so we're going to just the plan is to just kind of keep one or two snapshots and then use zREPL to migrate them off onto spinning media for bulk storage. And that's just comes down to not so much the problem you're discussing, but the disk space problem that we talked about.
Right. I am also considering that because we do have a backup scheme that's sort of doing that already, but I don't know about the retention policy on the far side of that connection, and I'm also a little concerned about the what do you call it, the cost of the data transfers across there. But that was also a thought, was I could just say, hey, we're already doing this offloading, and we could just be very chatty about that. Keep a lot of detail on the other side.
Daniel, is Zelta doing anything to help with tiering and friend?
Not well. I mean, for data collection, we output JSON, so so we get so we track list times and in addition to replication times. So that's really useful to figure out how much churning you're doing. So yeah, but I mean, I think as long as you're collecting all that and keep an eye on it, there's it's all good stuff.
Cool. Well, I hope you have the hardware and mental budget to explore that. And of course, just set the retention you want and start deleting from the tail end when push comes to shove and you start running out of space. I deal with that weekly on a client that's due for an update that's sitting across the room. I'm getting there.
I went and checked my two hosts in the basement, and one has 7,500 and the other one has 61,000 snapshots. And I had no idea how many I had. The 61,000 is all on spinning 12 terabyte drives.
And I trust performance is fine for your
It
basic
took a
application.
minute or two for that list to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Performance is okay, like read-write performance is okay.
And I suspect if you reran that search, it's cached, so you'll get a much faster.
Yeah, I was just going to do a time on it.
So I can tell you.
And the other host is all SSDs.
Cool. Well, Steve, I hope that helps.
It does, especially those comments about, hey, we've got a lot, and it hasn't affected the read-write. That's probably my main concern. It's what I was most concerned about, and I'll deal with the list and see how bad it gets from here.
Okay. And yeah, generally, CFS does the right thing. It doesn't step on its own foot. It's quite good about that. So yeah, it's something administrative like waiting for that list may be an issue, but if that happens from a cron job at 3 in the morning, you don't even have to worry about that. So
And I'll be honest about one other thing. I don't
I'm sorry.
remember what the point that it became unreasonable, where I felt it was unreasonably slow was at for the
Good
number.
point.
I can tell you for sure that it was dealing with trying to list snapshots taken on recursive data sets. So they were fairly deep, and so that could have also been, while
Right.
it's not as many snapshots, since they were taken recursively, it
That's a
was
good point.
very it ended up being a lot of snapshots because of that aspect, because they kind of scale heavily as I
And it
increase the number of um, sub file systems.
and it has to traverse all that, so
Yeah.
understandable. Has anyone dabbled with a dedicated metadata device, be it a flash device supplanting a spinning disk pool?
That scares me too much to attempt.
It gives me flashbacks to the good old days when if you lost your slog, you lost your pool rather than a few seconds of transactions. So yeah, the my spidey sense on triple mirroring, etc. does. Yeah.
If it was some host that had only easily reproducible data, I would try that. But most of my stuff, it's my
It's
stuff. It's
it's
pet.
one of the sorry.
No,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say it's one of those things where your whatever the device you're talking about has to be at the same level of redundancy as the rest of your array at least.
Yeah.
So in my case, if I've got a triple mirror array like I do for most of my work stuff, that device needs to be triple mirrored as well.
And my apprehension is illogical because of what you just said. Because at the moment, the redundancy for that data is the same as the rest of the data. So why wouldn't I be worried about putting it on other devices with the same level or more of redundancy? It's not
Yeah.
logical. My fear is not logical.
Well, I mean, it's not logical as long as you make that step. It is logical if you're not, and I think a lot of people are. I think the first instinct of, okay, am I doing this way is not what people are is not what people are thinking of. So that's something that just needs to be considered.
Cool.
I think special
Yes.
location classes are going to see more attention together with D-rate, because D-rate, especially on spinning disk, just doesn't perform well for small random reads and writes. And metadata is exactly that, synchronous little reads and writes. But it's so little that you can afford to have triple mirrored NVMe flash just for your metadata blocks.
Sounds like an attendee's having trouble with chat and or access. I'll do a quick check of that. Maybe I could do that in another window, but anyhow,
It's probably something on my end.
understood. Well, I certainly don't want you to be left out, but yeah, do ping with any such issues. I sure love the notion of any and all benchmarking relating to the new features, as I've said before. So here we are, we have an amazing new release with many long-awaited features upon us. Other questions, comments, to-do list items, wish list items, um, strategies to follow, events to attend.
Should we talk about the standardization of validating performance?
I would love to discuss that topic. Let her rip.
Okay, so it's basically the same as previous months when we started bringing up this topic. And at this point, I have a number of systems that are available and specifically deployed to work on this. They are a mix of Linux and FreeBSD. So as far as version tracking, for like regression testing and so forth, that would come later. But the initial work on baselines and application profiling is the initial stage of this. So that's going on all month. So that's pretty exciting. And then there are inevitably comparisons to not ZFS. And it's a mixture of NVMe and SAS for spinning drives and SAS for SSDs as well. And these are very large arrays.
That said, do you have a series of tests lined up? Are you looking for input on new tests or variations on those tests? How can people get involved?
Yes, it's both. I have the tests in one of my repositories. Let me go grab it here.
Okay.
It's over on Codeberg under my regular like open source profile. If I don't get it directly right now, I'll paste it to you so we can
Okay.
edit it
Drop
later.
in the
But
doc.
in any
Okay.
case, they're FIO tests. And some
Fantastic.
of them are standardized ones from Oracle and Red Hat, and others are modified ones that I've been working on for several years with Samsung and so forth and so forth.
That
So those
is
will be good, and
fantastic
they'll be,
news.
of course, available for feedback and modification and so forth. So when I get these all into profiles, like we talked about before, and
Sure.
yeah. On the Linux, it'll be block trace, like binary logs, and then on FreeBSD, it would be, utilizing dtrace.
Oh, fantastic.
There is Open dtrace for Linux, but I haven't deployed it yet, so I'm not sure if it's on parity really. So
That's a valid question. Has anyone tried OpenDTrace on Linux? Dare I say even Windows? Sounds like a no. I did a quick search of repos, didn't find it, but yeah, if you've got that link handy, fantastic. I've long pulpited on these calls about the fact that FIO is a workload modeler, but there are very few workloads to download and model. Thank you very much. And I was very intrigued about the fact that some folks were taking block trace to record a workload under Linux and then arguably play it back under FIO. So to narrow those two together and bring them in sync would be fantastic insofar as what if two users on two systems could vaguely accurately reproduce the same workload? Hallelujah. Anyway.
Yeah, and there's also, I don't know if it's a new feature with FIO, but there's a feature that's in there now for running it as a server, so that it can queue up workloads and take
Oh, interesting.
replay commands and recording commands and so forth. So that's pretty cool.
That's very cool. No,
Yeah.
I'll call it the server feature, and I'll dig up a link for that. Server feature 2.
There's also some interest in testing with RDMA over FIO, or FIO using RDMA, benchmarks. So the same ones could be used, same test could be used with RDMA fabric. And that's kind of intriguing. So I'm inevitably going to be playing around with that, but no specific date as of just yet. And then there's also some CUDA integrations, which is
CUDA
exciting.
as in graphics?
Yeah, like it can utilize memory storage on
Okay.
GPU fabrics.
Very, very cool. Okay, well,
As far as
yes.
dtrace goes, I take this with a strong grain of salt because I don't have a
You can
whole
take
lot of
this.
experience with it. But as I recall, it ends up being having in order to effectively use it from my experience, you really have to have a very low level understanding of what all is going on in the system. Far lower level than I usually do. And so I would wonder if, even though, Linux, FreeBSD, and Solaris at this point all have some variant of it, how cross-compatible some of that stuff would be just due to low-level variances within our kernels.
So
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
ZFS static trace points and so on should be mostly the same. The function boundaries inside the non-platform specific ZFS code should also be the same, but everything else, yeah.
Jan, what do you think about replaying block traces that have been recorded with FIO on FreeBSD, but then replayed over a Linuxolator or Linux virtual machine in Beehive? Do you think there's some usefulness there, or should we just skip that concept entirely?
If you're virtualizing, the performance measurement could also be on the host side, so that you would use dtrace points inside the Beehive user space process on the host to capture disk behavior in an operating system independent manner. Like play this script, it runs on all the different platforms you want to test, and you measure the performance of the hypervisor.
Perfect.
Which
Yeah,
is
that's a
kind
great
of
idea.
sane because it's measuring kind of end-to-end latency instead of having to deal with some kind of caching layer underneath in the disk drivers or something, or having to have special hardware. And for testing purposes, you could even use RAM disks if you want. You have to know that it changes the I/O scheduling even worse than NVMe potentially, but it should be pretty reproducible, and it gives you better run-to-run variants, hopefully.
For the
Wonderful.
minutes, what was the first suggestion of, be it pass-through or something? Jan?
I mean that function boundary tracing should still be possible because the functions, other than the port-specific ones for the portability layer into Linux, FreeBSD, or other operating systems, the normal ZFS functions in the kernel are still the same name and signature.
I see.
So any ZFS function you want to trace in the kernel with dtrace should just be the same function, basically.
Ooh, that's a good point.
But things like the virtual file system integration into the FreeBSD or Linux kernel are, of course, different for each operating system kernel.
Mm-hmm.
Those are just different functions which are only compiled in for a specific platform.
Okay. Is there a social media channel or chat platform this conversation should continue on in? Eva, do you have one of choice?
Well, we could use Telegram if you want, or Matrix. I'm up for either.
Okay. I have no objections. Who else present would like to follow along?
Are you talking about a way for this community to interact?
The people present as a start to discuss this notion of consistent workloads for various people to try and reproducible workloads. that's one that we've been talking about on and off for some time, but now is a great opportunity to bring some of that home. So, is that Steve? Anywho, at least Eva and I will be in touch, and we will update this group with what we find. But if you do want to join the conversation, reach out as you feel is appropriate.
I think I have been interested in the past in a place to sort of drop questions to this group. But I mean, honestly, we have the doc here, which works pretty well. But I guess what you're talking about now is something specifically for the conversation around the block trace.
Correct. Just
okay.
So that one's close to my heart, close to Eva's heart. But
Gotcha.
in general, yeah, there are ZFS discussions everywhere on the dozens of platforms out there, and it I guess start with the one you have and branch out from there, if that helps,
Right.
because I, for one, am drowning in platforms. Like, I don't need another one. Thank you very much, but such is life.
Noted.
Okay,
Thank you.
so that said, other topics or questions, ideas, concerns, funny jokes. Thank you for that link, Eva. I will hop through a number of social media platforms to get it over here, because on my phone I direct message my wife on one platform because she never reads it, so I use that as my paste bin. Yeah, proliferation is perhaps the best word for that. Let me hop between them. But thank you for that link. I guess we can look at it as a group. That is very exciting. No, Martin Sprung. Nope. Where'd it go? There we go. Got it. Back to the doc, the repo, even a place for it. The current repo of tests. Look at that. Look at that. Thank you, past self. And audience, we discussed a special topic yesterday on the jail call. It became the mail and DNS zones call. So that has been a well-received conversation that keeps coming up. So I'd argue it was by popular demand. Antrina gave an overview of his deployment that he's using in production at cert.am. And I think I got all the passwords masked out. And here is a start of your repo. And Eva, have you noticed that things like, what was it, AIO or something is not always cross-platform? The IO engine, that's it. That you made to say, oh, yeah, AIO, there it is. Go ahead.
And the IO platform is, yeah, you may find that one specific FIO setting gives you the highest believable numbers, but that doesn't mean that it's representative of a realistic workload.
I see.
So, for example, on FreeBSD, let's say you're using async IO with list IO and 16 1 megabyte writes in one list IO call, and then 8 threads doing that. Yeah, that's fine. You may see really nice numbers and actually see that you're getting close to theoretical disk throughput. You look at the sustained writes and think, yeah, great, I found a setting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now
Yeah.
try teaching Postgres to do that too.
Correct. My concern was going between OmniOS and, say, FreeBSD back in the day, a few years back for a presentation. But also, to continue your point, be very careful not to benchmark your RAM.
Oh, yeah, that's not what I meant. I meant that you actually, by picking the perfect IO engine in FIO, you may actually push gigabytes a second of data on your test server, and you actually confirm that it's making it to disk. You have like 10 gigabytes a second streaming disk throughput.
Mm-hmm.
You confirm it with IOstat, gstat, whatever, that there's actually data flowing and not just compression and arc lying to you.
Mm-hmm.
you like every 10 gigabytes you have data sync and so on. Great, but that's not a realistic configuration. Unless, I don't know, you're just storing a syslog stream or capturing pcaps of the network. That's not how your I/O pattern is going to look. So even if you don't misuse it, you can still set unrealistic expectations with file.
That said, have you noticed anyone taking the time to compare an AIO engine to Postgres, as you named as an example, and other real world
You
applications?
would have to kind of run a Postgres benchmark, write a custom dtrace script to now record what's happening, and then try to recreate a similar system call trace with file. That's the only idea I have. I don't know if they have actual tooling to help you capture a workload.
Well, that's kind
They
of
haven't
what
looked
we're
that
talking
deeply
about.
into it.
Cool. Trace. Okay. Well, yes. Yeah.
So for that, you don't want to find out specific kernel function, but probably you want to trace either system calls or directly into the geom probes or something there in FreeBSD.
Is this what they call keeping it real?
Hmm?
Okay. Well, thank you. Anything else at this time, or shall we call it good
I
and go
mean,
give that new release a try? Yes, Jan.
given that we have a different audience, I could repeat what I said, demonstrated last week about my jail stuff, but that's already recorded, I think.
It is recorded. I believe it is. I need to disappear on the hour for what it's worth. It appears to be 9:50 something. 21. So, other topics, questions, ideas, fun news? Well, Jan, Andrew, Dan, Eva, and Steve, how about we keep our questions landing here? Ping me on what social media, Steve, you can find me on, and I'll nudge you elsewhere. But mail me if you like, and there's definitely some activity on every platform out there, for better or for worse. And there is the official Slack channel, but it's a lot more developer oriented than user oriented. So maybe that needs its own companion user channel and summit. Anyhow, there's a question to Mr. Bell about additional questions. We good? Well, I will call it. You're welcome to talk amongst yourselves. But hey, thank you at 52 after, let's call it. Congratulations to everyone who participated in the new release. Thank you everyone who helped test it to get it ready for production. And thank you, Eva, for that exciting repo that I will be diving into. Okay, who wants the honors?
Like, subscribe, and have a great remainder of your day.
Thank you, sir. Take care, everyone. Bye.